In today's video, I'm going to be talking about Kawhi Leonard and why I think he's turning into one of the most underappreciated NBA superstars of all time. Kawhi is one of my favorite players right now and of all time. If you guys watch my channel, you know I'm a big Toronto Raptors fan, and I have been for a while, and obviously I absolutely loved Kawhi for what he did in 2019, leading the Raptors all the way to their first NBA championship and really carrying their team, and I just think he's such an overall complete and great all-time player that doesn't get enough recognition for what he's done throughout his NBA career and really just how great he is. So let's get into it, but before we start, if you're new to the channel, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on any of my new NBA videos, and so that we can continue the road to 1,000 subscribers for the channel. With that being said, let's get started. So the first thing I'm going to be discussing here is a player that many NBA fans around the world have considered the most underappreciated player in the NBA of all time for a long time now, and that's Tim Duncan. And I think that the way Tim Duncan has been viewed over the course of his career and his post-NBA career so far is similar to what is happening and will continue to happen to Kawhi Leonard, and how both of them I think are really underappreciated. So we look at Tim Duncan throughout his career. He played his entire long career with the San Antonio Spurs and did tons of great things in his career, like win 5 championships, be one of the greatest defensive players that we've ever seen, and won 2 MVPs back-to-back in 2002 and 2003. And for a while, especially after he retired, he was considered one of the most underappreciated, if not the most underappreciated NBA player of all time by many fans out there. And I actually agreed with these for a long time until now, just because pretty much everyone is considering Tim Duncan as a top 10 player of all time, and I think that's the recognition he deserves. It's not like people are going to start saying the fact that he's not considered a top 3 or top 5 player of all time isn't enough recognition for him, unless you think that, and obviously that's your own opinion, but in my opinion, he's not as underappreciated as he used to be, because he's finally getting that recognition now as easily a top 10 player of all time. And I really think the main reason that he was overshadowed over the majority of his career is because of how he was overshadowed by a player like Kobe Bryant. Kobe and Tim Duncan were the two best players of their era, but Kobe Bryant had the more flashy play style, and he was basically the better scorer, and we know what Kobe was all about with his game. He had an amazing fadeaway, an amazing mid-range shot, and could score anywhere on the court, and because of his game, he got more of the attention as one of the best players in his era than a guy like Tim Duncan did, who is more of a traditional kind of center type of player who is more focused on the defensive end of the floor and did things like hit a lot of shots down low in the post and hit bank shots, and he was just a more overall older style type of player, but is still considered a top 10 player of all time. And that's the main reason I think he was underappreciated, and it's very similar to what Kawhi is going through right now, in my opinion. When you think about the 2010s decade of the NBA, and especially the later half of that, pretty much anywhere from 2013 or 2014 up until right now, you think of a few main players, and the 3 that basically all come to mind for all of us will be obviously LeBron James, arguably the greatest player of all time, Steph Curry, the greatest shooter of all time, and I don't know one NBA fan that doesn't love watching Steph Curry's play style and how he gets open shots and really just how amazing of a shooter he is, and also Kevin Durant, one of the greatest scorers of all time. And really just those 3 guys, LeBron, Curry, and Kevin Durant, are the 3 guys that we think about when we think of this era of the NBA. We also might think of some guys like Chris Paul, Russell Westbrook, and Anthony Davis, but also Kawhi goes unnoticed, and I really think that he should be considered in that group of LeBron, Curry, and Kevin Durant as the greatest players of our era, and especially in the category of those 3. I really think Kawhi should be in there, and I think oftentimes some of his greatness goes unnoticed because he's overshadowed by these guys, just like Tim Duncan was with Kobe Bryant. Let's look at what Kawhi's done over the course of his career. The first thing that stands out is how he's won 2 Finals MVPs with 2 different teams. I honestly think that these Finals MVPs are much more valuable than regular season MVPs, which he hasn't won any of them yet, but like I mentioned, these Finals MVPs are just incredible. When we look at the Spurs in 2014, basically guarding LeBron James in the finals and leading that team in that series offensively and defensively all the way to winning the NBA championship, and then in 2019, that run with the Raptors was just completely insane, and he obviously led that team and really carried them on the offensive end of the floor, absolutely dominated, and that was probably the prime of his career, where after that season, Kawhi Leonard was really considered the best player in the NBA by many fans, including myself. So his 2 finals MVPs are something that is insane and should really boost his legacy, and again is something that goes unnoticed and forgotten by some NBA fans, just how good he was when he won those 2 finals MVPs and how it has to boost his legacy, especially in all-time rankings. He's also won 2 Defensive Player of the Years throughout his career and really should be considered one of the greatest on-ball defenders of all time, especially throughout the course of his entire career. I look at something like, again, in the 2014 finals when he guarded LeBron James, which really helped his San Antonio Spurs win the NBA championship that year, and really throughout his career how he's always taken on the task of guarding the other team's best player, no matter who it is, and he always does a great job of guarding on ball and is one of the greatest clampers that we've ever seen. And of course, Kawhi Leonard's scoring is very automatic and extremely efficient. For his career, he's shooting 49% from the field, 38% from 3, and 86% for the free throw line. So as a small forward, almost averaging 50, 40, 90 for his career is absolutely insane, and over the last 5 years of his career when he's been playing consistently, he's easily averaged anywhere from 25 to 28 points per game, as I mentioned, on very high volume and very high efficiency. From what I've seen, Kawhi's done everything to be considered a top 25 player of all time. Like I mentioned, those 2 finals MVPs with 2 different teams, and he always seems to win with whichever team he goes to. He's one of the greatest on-ball defenders that we've ever seen, also has won 2 Defensive Player of the Years, as I mentioned, and is one of the more efficient, dominant, and versatile scorers in the league that we've ever really seen. And because of all of this, I have to consider him a top 25 player of all time, but I really don't think he gets that recognition yet. I have a top 30 of all time list, and I actually have Kawhi Leonard ranked 22nd on that list right now, but as I mentioned, I don't think he gets the recognition that I'm giving him and that he really deserves yet. And a lot of people that I know don't even have Kawhi in their top 30 on their all-time list, and this is really why I think he's one of, if not the most underappreciated players of all time, especially if this continues to go on throughout his career. Now, something to point out is why Kawhi Leonard doesn't get enough recognition and attention than guys like, as I mentioned, LeBron, Steph Curry, and Kevin Durant, and it's mostly because Kawhi just doesn't get enough attention from the media, and like I mentioned, kind of with the Kobe and Tim Duncan situation as well, he's not as flashy as a player as guys like, of course, Steph Curry, Kevin Durant, who's one of the greatest scorers of all time, and of course, King LeBron James. And overall, these guys just get more attention from the media, and oftentimes Kawhi gets overshadowed by it. And as I mentioned, that's just like what happened with Kobe Bryant and Tim Duncan when they were the players of their era, and because of Kobe's play style and things like the Mamba mentality and just overall what kind of a person and what kind of a player he was, he just got more attention from the media than Tim Duncan. I think Tim Duncan and Kawhi have a lot of similarities. They both kind of have like that robot type of personality and also a robot type of play on the court. I don't really know how to describe it. They're just kind of more automatic. They don't really do anything flashy out there on the court, and mostly because of this, I think they've gotten overshadowed for a while, and finally fans have recognized how great of a player Tim Duncan really was, and I think this will happen with Kawhi too. I really think Kawhi could go through that same cycle that Tim Duncan went through in him and Kobe Bryant's era of being one of the greatest players of that era, doing everything to be considered an all-time, maybe top 20 player, and not getting the recognition because they're overshadowed. But then, really by the end of Kawhi's career, I see people coming out and saying, wow, I can't believe people didn't consider Kawhi a top 15 or top 20 player of all time, or whatever he deserves to be considered by then. And like I mentioned, just kind of a similar cycle of Tim Duncan, as when he retires, a couple years after he retires, maybe people finally realize that he's really underappreciated, and they finally appreciate what Kawhi Leonard did throughout his career, just like what happened with Tim Duncan and how he was underappreciated and overshadowed by Kobe for a long time, but then finally got the recognition when his career was ended. So one more quick thing I'm going to point out before I end off this video is in this season, specifically the 2020 and 21 NBA season, just how underappreciated and underrated Kawhi Leonard Leonard is this season. He's averaging 26 points per game with 7 rebounds and 5 assists, 2 steals on 52% from the field, 40% from 3, and 88% from the line. So pretty much 50-40-90 as a small forward this season, with a 57% effective field goal percentage, 62% true shooting, and all of this while still probably being considered a top 10 defender in the NBA. He's doing all of this basically having an MVP caliber season, and it's going completely unnoticed because we're focusing on other players like Nikola Jokic, Joel Embiid, Steph Curry, LeBron James, and all those other guys that get more attention from the media, especially this season when it comes to things like the MVP race and rankings. I mean, if I were to do a list right now, and by the end of the season I'll probably release a big top 50 list, but I'm still putting Kawhi Leonard in my top 3. And I know that seems pretty high, but I just think he's really underappreciated, and stuff like this goes completely unnoticed, and especially the fact that he's still one of the better defenders in the league puts him top 3 for me. I've got LeBron James number 1, Steph Curry number 2, and Kawhi number 3. That's right, I'm putting him over Kevin Durant, and I'm putting him over Giannis. I still think Kawhi Leonard is in the top tier of players in the NBA and has to be considered a top 3 player, and he's really underappreciated now, and like I mentioned, really throughout his entire career. So there you have it. That is the end of today's video. This is why I think Kawhi Leonard is one of, if not the most underappreciated NBA player of all time, and by the end of his career, how he finally might get the recognition that I think he deserves, and how he might go through a similar cycle like a guy like Tim Duncan, who is also considered the most underappreciated player of all time for a while, and still might be considered that by a few NBA fans, but right now he's finally getting the recognition as being a top 10 player of all time, and I think that'll happen to Kawhi later in his career too. He'll finally get whatever recognition that he truly deserves as an NBA player, and I really just think that his greatness goes unnoticed oftentimes, and by the end of his career, people might finally recognize just how good he is and how we really have to appreciate his game for what it is. Thank you all for watching this video. If you're new, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on any new videos, and I'll see you all next video.